I'd like to discuss the brief origins of the Kievan Rus. It's a lot of questions on how Russia originated. You have Slavic influences, you have a lot of Middle Eastern influences, you have some Asian influences, but the Kievan Rus generally looks at Scandinavian influences. There are normally 2 to 3 schools of thought on how Russia began, but we're going to focus primarily on what is called the Norman theory right now. It's the Scandinavians having come in, having been asked by the people of the northern portion of Russia and what would be Belarus and parts of eastern Poland to come in. And this is what the primary chronicle bases their whole story upon, is the idea of they accordingly went overseas to the Varangian Rus, basically saying they were asked to come in and save Russia. The basic origins of the Kievan state is really a true blend. It's a hybrid, if you would, of Slavic, Greek, and Viking traditions. Slavic being the Eastern Europeans, primarily Polish, and Cyrillic languages. Romanians, Bulgarians, there's a lot more in common there than meets the eye. The Greeks with the Byzantine Empire and the Eastern Greek Empire, what really survived after about 476, and the contact that the southern part of Russia and the Kiev residents had. They had a lot of contact with the Byzantine Empire, and then eventually Viking traditions. And this term is relatively new. From the mid-1800s, it was a historical term. It calls about the period when the center of Russia, or the center of Russian society, was centered in Kiev and not in Moscow or St. Petersburg. And we're going to see Kiev rise and fall, and then we'll see Moscow rise, and then the empire of Russia, after Peter the Great, will really move to St. Petersburg, and it'll shift back and forth. And this area is very small. It's not all of Russia. It's primarily western Russia, and it's between the Baltic and the Black Seas. It includes Minsk, Novgorod, obviously Kiev. It will eventually include Moscow down the road, and it's primarily populated at this time, at the beginning of this, around 800 AD, by Eastern Slavic tribes, which we'll see later. This map illustrates the Eastern Slavic tribes and how they inhabited the area that we're going to be discussing. And Moscow is really farther to the east than we will get into, but it will eventually be expanded. You have the Khazar Khanate, which had a lot of influence. You had the different Bulgars, the Volga Bulgars. You have almost a tribal sense in Eastern Europe, about 700 to 800 AD. And by this time, it is really tribes and barbaric tribes coming in to help so-called civilize what we know as Russia. And Kiev being near the center, towards the bottom along the river, with access to the Black Sea. Most of what we know is the Normanist view that says the Scandinavians civilized the Slavs, and that those are the people that accept what is considered the primary chronicle of the 1000 and 1100s as the gospel, if you will, of Russian history. Now, if you go to the true Russian and Ukrainian nationalists, the Rus themselves were Slavs. Therefore, they were already civilized. And they're going to say that they really didn't need these Scandinavians, that the Scandinavians came in on their own without being invited. I think there's a little truth to both. The Scandinavians, by about 1100, this is about 200 to 300 years after the actual invasions and the landings of the Scandinavians. I think they were getting blown out of proportion to make the Russians look themselves good. If you take the Ukrainian nationalist theories, if you take the true Normanist theories that they were civilized, I think you have to take one step further, that the Scandinavians, the Viking barbarians, if you will, really had conquered everything they could to the west. They were just looking for somewhere else to conquer. So there's a big argument to be made here. The final piece of the puzzle is, when exactly did this happen? When did these Vikings arrive in northern Russia? And when did they start to create this new Russian state from this wildly nomadic tribal banding of peoples throughout Eastern Europe and Western Russia, basically, as we know it today. And how did they emerge? What caused this to happen? And that's what the next few lectures and videos will show up and discuss, hopefully.